Bidui! Merry meet, mortals! I am but a wary wood-nymph known as Pan. As I sit sheltered, nestled in the arms of my brother the oak-tree, my heart sings to tell thee a tale of fellowship folly. Plebeians, hear ye the story of poor Pete the peasant's plight. See here, a fireplace, brick of red, in the centre the conciergerie, a former Paris prison. 'Tis Samhain, Halloween of your modern day. In the fire lie 3 lit logs burning bright. On the mantel a trumpet-shaped flower, the color of amber, sits in a pot of peat. A memorial plaque hangs above the flower, and above that is a stained-glass window of the Archangel Gabriel. In a corner of the conciergerie, a black widow spider spins her silver web. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By an 18th century prison cell, faces the fireplace. Next to it hangs a coal black fire alarm. Miss Talleyrand is on a field trip with her class. Suddenly, wearing rocket shoes with wheels in the heels, New World Unruly student Frankie bursts skating out of a door like a firebolt. His hair, like a lit match, is a flaming faux hawk, the color of electric blue with warm, honey-colored tips, chasing the cool as tranquil waters in it. Like a mad highwayman, he cuts off his classmates. Students shriek, "Frankie! Hey!" and "Watch it!" Frankie trips over a power cord, but a net catches him. This immature and selfish son of a CEO is used to having his own way. Sitting on the hearth, unnoticed, a smoldering young man wears peasant's ashen rags. His braided hair, the color of golden wheat, hangs over his shoulder. He watches the two play out their dance around the fireplace, and Nat retires to join her best friend Milo, who stands near the cell. Frankie, a buffoon, the cursed clay-braid coxcomb, rudely interrupts Miss Talleyrand as she speaks about the peasants' overtaxation leading to the 1789 Wars of Wheat. The class moves on to Marie Antoinette's wing of the prison, leaving behind Frankie. Seeing an opportunity, he begins to pull the fire alarm. Abruptly speaking to Frankie, the young man introduces himself as Pete. Startled, the little firecracker drops his hand down swiftly. Frankie joins Pete at the hearth. They have an unsuccessful heart-to-heart talk about Frankie's uncaring, rebel-without-a-cause attitude. Illustrating his point, Pete hand-scoops grain out of his pouch. He lets it fall like rain from his fingertips back into the bag. Frankie thinks it's gold. Pete softly sighs. With my pixie dust, they travel back in time to the 1789 French Revolution. The year is 1789. We are now at a mill outside Paris. Ah, phew! The agony of the dwarf feet. Don't let the smells of beaded sweat and dirty Jim's socks disturb you. These are the unwashed, toiling poor. These smells intermingle with that of fresh pine. The pine's scent hovers in the air as it drifts off of its ever-so-green, soft needles. What enchantment is this? As the dark night falls one early spring, I peer up through my embracing eyes to the iron Ithelman, the moon. The rising of smiling Selene, being couched in the constellation of a brilliant Aries. In all of his nightly glory, Aries proudly sits silently upon his warrior throne. He casts down his smoldering gladiator gaze, his ireful eyes full of fire and blood, upon the warm amber glow of a snapping, popping, and crackling campfire before me. Twinkling fire fairies at the dawning give delight, dancing in the night nigh, the firelight releasing a sweet surrender, bathing below in the silver moonlight of shimmering Selene, whose radiant beauty shines bright. 2 brothers, Gabriel and Simon, huddled around this campfire. They warm themselves from the polar ice coldness of the Versailles court. From the fire rises the smoky smell of a 4th of July barbecue. After a thankless hard day's back-breaking work, Gabriel sleeps while Simon warms a scrap of bread in a pan over the fire. Out of the pan, flashing sparks fly into the sky. Pete and Frankie join the two peasants. See the starving Gabriel. He sits with one eye open. Simon sets down his pan and proudly adds sticks to the ember fire. As soon as Simon's back is turned, the desperately hungry Gabriel lunges for the bread. Gabriel and Simon play tug-of-war until Gabriel gives a final yank that sends Simon somersaulting into orbit. Gabriel quickly gobbles the ration. Poor Simon. These are desperate times. Someone is always hungry. Pete draws bread from his coat. Where it comes from, we do not know. Breaking bread with his compatriots, Pete hands the minuscule rations to Simon and Gabriel. At the campfire solemnly stands an olive oak. From the deep rich roots of my brother the oak, an ivy snakes its way up to the canopy of the cosmos. Majestically, wise Aderon, this lord of trees, bows to a grave marked by red rocks arranged as a heart. On a branch, a caterpillar creeps down towards the grave. The weeping boughs crack and rustle within a gentle gale. This moaning warm wind is a twilight tree. Above Aderon, a luminous moonbeam breaks through the clouds. Its somber light streams through the shadows, illuminating the heart. Oh, sweet sorrow, below this heart lies Daniel, Pete's 1-year-old son, entered into eternal slumber. Pete blames Daniel's death on the insatiable appetites of the avid aristocrats. The peasants are angry about how they sow seeds, and then at harvest time, the lazy landlords collect the crops, robbing the rewards right off the backs of the poor. They greedily reap the fruits of the peasants' labor. Consequently, the state starves as that weasel of a greedy Drow King, Wally, and his callous queen Tiara, a.k.a. Madame Deficit, Minuet, the midnight hour away. Hiding in their tyrant tower, they look down on the peasants. Heated, the plebeians plan to meet on the morrow at the botanical gardens. They are tired of paying the aristocrats' taxes. The next afternoon's sun, sultry as the savannah, beats down on the peasants. A smell of hot dog poop looms in the air as a brisk breeze of spring brings a sweet scent of roses to the noses. Just like those aristocrats leave a mess for another to clean up. Like a fiery phoenix from its ashes, tempers are rising, fed up with picking up the bill for all the king's fancy feasts, resulting in the peasants' famine. Pete and his peasants assembled at the botanical gardens. Harvesting the news of the day, they seek a solution to the rising bread prices. Nearby, a snobbish palace servant double-parked a stagecoach. Angering Pete's firestorm wife Marie, she tells off the arrogant servant. Ignoring her, the servant approaches Pete. Carrying a vanilla, scrupulous squirrel, bound by a scarlet tie, he is dressed from tip to toe in the finest of silks. In contrast, Pete is dressed in the ricketyest rags lovingly patched by Marie. The servant unfolds the scroll. Clearing his throat, he reads aloud. It is a court summons for corvée duty. Unpaid road work. Angry about the summons, Pete addresses the peasants. Immediately, the fired-up peasants carry him onto the table, rather than allow him to mount it. During his speech, the peasants applaud like spicy applesauce. Pete's 10-year-old deaf-mute sweet pea Frances walks to a mighty old oak. She takes some lovely lime leaves. whispering words of wisdom to Pete. Pete's compatriot Camille hands him his 2 pistols. Yelling, "To arms! To arms!" Pete waves the weapons in the air. Then he leaps off the table. The peasants emphatically embrace him. Francis brings Pete the leaves. He puts one first symbolically in his hat, then distributes some more among those who surround him. Listening nearby, monkeying around, a stumbling Girondin veteran spoon-feeds a lush mulberry bush. Frankie, curious, walks to him. Hearing "to arms," the veteran proudly raises his silver spoon to the silky sky. He waves it in the air like a weary weapon. He then proceeds to beat the bush with it. Meanwhile, flapping his right elbow, he runs around the bush once. Then, hee-hawing, he crazily rides an imaginary small elephant. Meanwhile, 2 shrewish, calculating courtesans carrying parasols, dressed to the nines, leisurely stroll through the gardens. Icily, cold as coins, they snidely walk as if they owned the gardens. Their perfume starched shirts do not stink. One of the icy, narcissistic noblewomen is short, stocky, and elderly. She smokes a cigarette from a fancy long cylinder holder. Ill-looking, she is a weasel of a woman with the look of Leona Hemsley about her. Her eyes are immense green with greed. The other witch, of husky build, resembles a glutinous goblin. She has ice-blue eyes to match her frosty soul. This ignoble carries a small dog. Of a snappish air, these many the moochers make an Arctic blast look warm. Fanning themselves with French fans, they approach the impoverished peasants. One lady holds her ear as she has an earache. She does not watch where she is walking and rudely runs into Gabriel. Smelling poverty, noses wrinkled in disgust, the aristocrats ignore the peasants. Gabriel gallantly flirts with them. Disgusted, the Baron picks up a stone and casts it at him, and misses. Smirking, her friend blows cigarette smoke into his face. Bull-like, nostrils flaring, Gabriel starts to charge after her. Simon stops him from giving the Baron a high five to her face. Sharp noses pointed high in the air, and pursed lips looking down upon the peasants. The remissed chicky ladies leave the gardens without a care in the world. Noticing Frankie, curious as a kitty, Frances walks to him. Confused, she rubs her eyes. She walks to Pete. Excited, she shows fast hand movements. Pete tells his daughter to slow down. She slows down her gestures. She looks at Frankie. Pointing at him, she shows who's the boy. She hungrily holds her howling tummy. Pete answers, "Sweet pea, that boy is our secret." Frances rubs her tummy. She shows that she is hungry. Pete regretfully replies, "I am going to find food for your tummy." Frances sadly nods okay. Hugging her rag doll tightly, she watches her father leave. Fearing for his life, Marie warns Pete about her bad intuition, attempting to reassure his wife that when he comes back they will eat like carefree kings. He tenderly caresses her.